We're going to be hearing from a variety of plaintiffs in this case. And first, we're going to hear from the lead counsel, David Seide, who's from the Government Accountability Project. Please join me in welcoming David to the National Press Club.
Thank you, Bill. As he said, I'm an attorney with the Government Accountability Project, which is the oldest public interest firm and advocacy group in the United States. We've represented thousands of whistleblowers, and we've represented many Voice of America employees for the past 5 years. Now, we are here because there's a tragedy that we're witnessing before our eyes. The tragedy is obviously the fact that 5 networks reaching a worldwide audience of 425 million every week have been closed. They've been blacked out. And why and how? That has happened because of a stroke of the pen and the actions of an anonymous, remorseless machine that has, within days, achieved what the Chinese, the Iranians, the North Koreans, and the Iron Curtain countries weren't able to do in decades. They have turned black for those 425 million people, Voice of America and its sister agencies. Now, we're here to help. We're here to stop the machine. And I'm going to just run through what the program is going to look like. These are 3 of the named plaintiffs in the case. So for background, we filed a lawsuit 10 days ago in the federal court in New York. We filed in federal court in New York, in large part because it's the media capital of the world, and this is a media case. There's Patsy Widakuswara, Jessica Jerreat, and Katheryne Neeper. Steve Herman on the far left is national correspondent for Voice of America, and Steve and I have worked together in Trump administration #1, where he was targeted, and now in Trump administration #2. And on my far left is lead litigation counsel and frankly co-counsel to the case, Andrew Celli of the law firm Emery, Celli, Brinckerhoff, and I'll stop there. They're based in New York, and they're First Amendment media law firm. So what I wanted to do is give you an update on where we are with the case. We filed with representing 13 different plaintiffs. So there were 4 labor unions involved, AFGE, AFSCME, the Communications Workers of America, and the American Foreign Services Association. There are 2 public interest free press organizations, Reporters Without Borders from France, where their main headquarters is, and the United States, and 7 plaintiffs. Now, I've already introduced the three of us here. There are 4 other plaintiffs who are in John Doe capacity. They are obviously concerned about their lives, frankly. The 2 of those plaintiffs have to return to their home countries if, in fact, things go as the way the machine wants them to. And those home countries will prosecute journalists. So we're here to help. And how have we done that? 3 days ago, last Friday, we obtained a court order in federal court in New York, a temporary restraining order. Now, in a nutshell, that order is intended to stop the machine from going any further. And that's what the order does. It orders the defendants, which include Kari Lake, the current acting director of parent agency, USAGM, and the agency itself, to stop taking any further steps to reduce or terminate the workforce. So as you know, 14 days ago, 2 weeks ago, 1,500 employees received essentially termination notices. They were told to drop their pencils and pens and typewriters and computers and stop all work and wait and see what was going to happen next. They were locked out of the building. Effectively, the networks went dark once that happened. And what ensued were termination notices that were about or have gone out. And the order stops that process. The order says the agency, the defendants, cannot take any steps to reduce the size of the workforce any further. And there are plenty of steps they have to take because at least 1,000 employees are protected by civil service laws. And civil service laws give folks a variety of procedural protection. Give me a second. So where does that leave us? Our primary goal, and the reason we filed this complaint, is not simply to stop the machine, it's to reverse the machine. It's to put us where we should have been, say, 3 weeks ago, which was a vibrant, active organization with 5 networks broadcasting to 425 million people in 100 countries in 69 languages with 3,000 hours of content per week. That's why we're here. And the only way we can get the networks operating again is to get the people who operate the networks back on the job. So what our goal is to get an order from the court to not only stop the machine like they have, that's obviously a good, promising first step, but our next step is to reverse the machine, as I said. So what will happen in terms of the litigation is over the next ensuing days, we are going to go back to federal court where we already are and where our papers are already filed to present why, in fact, the court should order the reinstatement of those folks that we represent. So with that in mind, what I propose to do is we have a short video. It's 90 seconds long. It talks about the people at the organizations who are being affected in a real world way. They're the true victims. In fact, there are 1,500 victims. So these are the affiliates. Okay. So the affiliates represent the 4 networks that are funded by USAGM.
3,500 affiliates just from VOA alone around the world.
Okay, thanks, Patsy. So with that in mind, we'll show you the video. We'll then call on our distinguished guests. We'll also recognize their number of plaintiffs who are organizations, law firms who are here today, and we're going to recognize those folks. And I'll just give you a sense of the size of this organization. We assembled this coalition literally in days. It consists of no less than 7 law firms with 15 or 16 lawyers working full-time on this case, essentially 24/7 for the last 15, 16 days. So it's a salute to everyone here. And we are simply the representatives of the team. And it's been an outstanding team of some of the best lawyers in the United States, without doubt. And we appreciate you coming today to share with us this. At the end, we'll obviously take as many questions as you have. And with that in mind, let's play the video.
This is the voice of America.
The voice of America.
Jimmer aus Amerika.
Welcome to the voice of America in Washington.
This is the voice of America.
The news may be good or bad. We shall tell you the truth.
U večerašnjoj emisiji trebalo je da govore i kolege sa Glasa Amerike, međutim...
Without VOA Africa, without Studio 7, we are going to be living in a permanent state of information poverty.
VOA bukan hanya media yang menyampaikan berita, bagi kami juga menjadi jembatan persahabatan komunitas Indonesia dan Amerika Serikat yang...
VOA always provide a new perspective on every news in the United States and always provide the latest news related to the White House.
Voice of America has been an important part of our democratic journey in Zimbabwe.
耀毅你好，真心感谢这几年下来，每个月你跟早安台湾节目的。
M1 is working with Voice of America for more than 10 years. Our cooperation is absolutely great. The story that we are getting from the reporters from the Serbian section of Voice of America are very meaningful to our audience. So that's why we think that voice from Voice of America should not be silenced.
Now I'm going to call on Patsy, our first name plaintiff. And Patsy, if you could call on the next person speaking so I don't have to say that again.
Thank you, David. David has been our champion from even before day one. David and I go way back. He was also my whistleblower lawyer back in 2021. So we have a great relationship. I trust him with my life, and now I trust him with the lives of basically 1,300 of my colleagues. So I became lead plaintiff in this case against Kari Lake and the United States Agency of Global Media on behalf of 1,300 colleagues who are now in danger of losing their jobs. And we believe what the administration is doing is basically violating congressional power to authorize and fund our work because they see our work, our independent journalism that's protected by the VOA Charter, which is a law, as inconsistent with the agenda of the administration. With VOA silence, our 360 million weekly global audience is deprived of factual and balanced news. And that includes the 3,500 affiliates, television, radio, digital, and all the other affiliates that's now depending on the Voice of America's production and reporting that have gone silent. And what you just saw are just some of those affiliates representing them. I was VOA's White House bureau chief, but for me, this fight is personal. I grew up in Indonesia under the Suharto regime, an authoritarian regime, and I fought against it in the 1998 student-led movement that overthrew his 32-year regime. And I began at that time my career as a young journalist working for American television networks who came to Indonesia to cover the 1998 riots and demonstrations. And one of my first clients was actually Fox News. And so until that time, I didn't know what freedom of the press looked like because I had never seen it. So I'd never imagined in my wildest dreams that 27 years later, I will be taking the United States government to court to defend the freedom of the press and the First Amendment. As a journalist, I'm protective of the First Amendment, and as an American, I'm fiercely proud of the fact that we are a nation of laws. A republic, if you can keep it. We must keep it. So I hope you'll join us in our fight to save VOA. And now I call on my colleague and dear friend Jessica Jerreat, who's the second named plaintiff of the case.
Thanks, Patsy, and thank you to everyone for being here, especially to the National Press Club and Bill and the Press Freedom Centre for all of the support, and to our lawyers and colleagues. I'm Jessica Jerreat. I'm the VOA Press Freedom Editor, and I'm a plaintiff in this case. VOA for 83 years has embodied the principles of a free press, and through its journalism, it showed the positive impact that the free press can have when you have access to credible, accurate, objective news that brings a huge positive force of good for audiences in the most censored parts of the world. It's that reputation and passion to uphold and export the First Amendment that led me to join VOA as the first press freedom editor 5 years ago. In that time, I've directed coverage across 49 language services, looking at global efforts to attack, discredit, threaten journalists into silence, and how disinformation and propaganda seeks to fill that void. So when my colleagues and I were put on leave, our broadcast silenced, and our vulnerable colleagues put at serious risk to their own safety, I had no doubt that this was the right action to take a lawsuit to defend our rights. Journalism is a powerful force of good. VOA has proved that time and time again in its broadcasts to Russia, China, Afghanistan, Iran, anywhere else in the world where powerful actors would rather work in darkness. That's why we're fighting to make sure that VOA's broadcasts do not stay silent, and this is not the end of our 83-year history. I'm now going to introduce you to Katheryne Neeper, who's our Director of Strategy.
Tight back there. Hi, everyone. My name is Katheryne Neeper. I'm on administrative leave from my job as Director of Strategy and Performance Assessment at the U.S. Agency for Global Media. I'm also one of the 3 named plaintiffs. I'm here not as a journalist, but as a civil servant who spent my career working with amazing journalists like my co-plaintiffs in support of this mission. We've always taken our responsibility as a taxpayer-funded organization incredibly seriously, and we were prepared to work with new leadership on efficiencies or restructuring. But that's not what's happening here, nothing of the sort. This is a wholesale dismantling of an amazing institution. Our mandate and our funding come from the Congress, which has supported this organization on a bipartisan basis for more than 80 years in its role providing truthful information to the world. Shutting down Voice of America and its sister organizations is unwise, of course, and will result in our adversaries like China, Russia, and extremist groups dominating the information space. But doing it this way, with no consultation with the Congress and entirely outside of the normal budget and legislative processes, is also illegal. And it's dangerous, putting the safety and freedom of journalists who have worked with us from authoritarian countries at serious risk. I'm so proud to be part of this effort to preserve this institution and to protect our colleagues. And thank you so much for your interest in hearing from our coalition today. And introducing Steve.
Thank you, Kate, David, Patsy. Good morning, everyone. I'm Steve Herman, Chief National Correspondent of The Voice of America, who was suspended on February 28th, a couple of weeks before a similar fate was handed to my 1,350 colleagues. This is a genuine constitutional emergency. As we speak, government officials have forbidden journalists from reporting and broadcasting the news. That's the opening of the preliminary statement in request of the temporary restraining order and preliminary injunction in the complaint against our parent agency, the U.S. Agency for Global Media. The federal judge in New York City, in granting that unlimited TRO, said that the actions that were taken by the U.S. government were arbitrary and capricious. As the complaint states, Congress's statutory mandate is that the Voice of America continually broadcast to the world, and that is being defied. Shutting down VOA, Radio TV Marti, which has come back on the air, fortunately, RFE-RL, Radio Free Asia, Al Hurra TV, and Radio Sawa is unconstitutional and unlawful. The defendants have maligned VOA journalists without basis, calling us such things as incompetent and even terrorist sympathizers. As the filing also outlines, Voice of America's journalists and broadcasts have been silenced. Those on J-1 visas, some of them face imminent return to countries where they would be persecuted, imprisoned, and possibly worse. USAGM, according to the filing, has no authority to shut itself down, notwithstanding Congress's decision to create the agency and provide it with funding. And Congress has specifically required that VOA and RFA actually increase programming to North Korea and provide around-the-clock coverage to Iran. None of that is going on now. In my petition, I note that the abrupt cessation of programming and broadcasting has disrupted the core mission of VOA to inform, engage, and connect people around the world in support of freedom and democracy. The credibility of the Voice of America, which was carefully built over decades, has been severely undermined. the long-term consequences of silencing VOA will reverberate globally, eroding the influence and moral authority of the United States at a time when factual, independent journalism is more vital than ever. Thank you. David? Oh. Andy, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Good morning. I'm Andrew Celli with the law firm of Emery, Celli, Brinckerhoff, Abady, Ward, and Maazel in New York City. I'll spell it out for you if you like. I'm really here today mostly in a technical capacity. I'm one of the courtroom lawyers in the case in New York, and I'm happy to respond to questions about the case as such. But I can't pass up this opportunity to say two things. One is that it has been a privilege, a true privilege, to do this case with David Seide and the folks at the Government Accountability Project, and with Gina Yeomans and her colleagues at AFSCME and the other unions. These are tremendous lawyers, and they brought me in as a First Amendment person, but it's been a huge group effort, and we would not have achieved what we've achieved so far without this team. The second thing I want to say is it has been an enormous privilege, a lifetime privilege, an honor really, to represent these clients. You know, I was thinking about this today, that during the pandemic, we all talked about essential workers, the people who deliver packages, the people who deliver health care to our citizens. Journalists are essential workers. They are essential in this case because they deliver the news to the world, not to our homes, but to the rest of the world. And so, as I said, I'm here today to answer any questions about the case, but I love these folks, and I wish them well.
Yeah, we'll just do the questions. I was going to introduce the other. I was going to introduce the other team members because they've been integral to the case. And let me start with the folks at AFSCME and Teague Paterson in particular. I just want to single out, though, Gina Yeomans, who, Gina, can you just wave to the folks so they see who you are? Gina is our ace litigator, and she did a fabulous job on Friday to convince the court to issue the order. I also want to single out Norm Eisen with Democracy State Defenders, because Norm is a legend in this space. His organization has been remarkably successful in enjoining the defendants in this case, and in other cases. Now, I want to just quickly run through other folks who are here. So we've had a variety of co-counsel, a variety of plaintiffs. So Kristin Bateman, who is senior counsel to Democracy Forward's here. Kristin, do you want to stand up? And thank you. Jon Schleuss, who is with CWA, the presidency. John, turn around so we can see you. Clayton Weimers, who is Executive Director of Reporters Without Borders. Clayton, are you here? Great. Give me a second here. Is some. Yeah. Who? Right. I'm sorry. I apologize. Paula Hickey, who is with AFG. Is Paula? Are you here? No. But AFG is integral to our case, and they are co-plaintiffs as well. And I don't see a representative from AFSA. Steve is AFSA. I'm sorry, Steve is AFSA. Steve, little do we know that Steve is a Foreign Service Officer, and as such, his union is AFSA, the American Foreign Services Association, and they've been fantastic as well. So those are all the folks here. I'm going to call on Teague, who has some remarks. So.
Thank you, David. Appreciate that for the opportunity to speak. As hopefully the voice here of organized labor, and we are. So I'm Teague Paterson, General Counsel of the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, and there's other unions on the case, as we've heard. I also want to acknowledge Wayne Enoch, who's the Executive Director of AFSCME District Council 20. With which Local 1418 is affiliated, and that's the bargaining unit we represent of VOA technicians. So since World War II, Voice of America has been a beacon of freedom and a reliable source of truth for people living under oppressive regimes and who have been cut off from reliable and truthful news sources. It has provided a picture into what it means to be an American, to be able to speak out, engage in peaceful protests, to vote, and through that process, hold leaders accountable. But this administration has snuffed out that beacon. It has silenced Voice of America, threatening to undo decades of progress and work. And that void that's left will no doubt be filled by dictators with harmful agendas and messages. So the coalition you've heard about today of journalists, our members, audio engineers, and other workers are really at the forefront of a battle to preserve freedom of the press and to spread the message of democracy across the globe. But now here in the United States, it's our public service workers who live in fear of the government, sadly, and fear retaliation should they speak out. Every week, it seems like another agency or program is being shuttered or diminished without regard to the law or any kind of due process or consideration. Voice of America was created by Congress. We know this. It was created to be an independent agency with journalistic freedom, and it can't be shut down simply because the president or those he's appointed want it so. And so that's what this case is all about. My union, American Federation of State, County, Municipal Employees, will always stand up for our members. At VOA, our members are proud to be the audio engineers who help broadcast to the over 360 million listeners across the globe of VOA. They work with journalists who work with in North Korea to Myanmar to Central Africa. And they deserve not just respect, but they deserve our admiration, quite frankly. But instead, unceremoniously and without any warning, they had their emails cut off, were told not to report to the station, and were later just laid off. It's unlawful, it's shameful, and frankly, it's un-American. And so the judge in our case has issued a temporary restraining order, thanks to the work of all the lawyers, thanks to the work of Gina Yeomans in our department who argued the case, and all the important work that was done on the briefs. And now we're working, as you heard, to make that permanent. And here's why. When asked about why they were committed to working at Voice of America, one of our members, one AFSCME member told us, and they didn't want to be named for fear of retaliation, but they said that halfway across the world, someone may live in a country where their power or their lights go out, but they can turn on their radio and it's like magic. Voice of America is there to tell them what's happening so that they don't have to live in darkness. So AFSCME is truly proud to represent people like this, really the true patriots, and we're going to keep fighting these unconstitutional attacks in the coming weeks and wherever we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Teague. I'm going to call on Jon Schleuss, who is the president of the Communications Workers of America.
Just the president of the NewsGuild CWA. We're part of the Communications Workers of America. We're the largest union of journalists in North America, representing workers at the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, at Politico, at The Hill, many other publications. We don't represent the workers at Voice of America. We do represent the workers at Radio Free Asia, and some of them are in the room, so if you want to raise your hands. There's a few of those journalists here with us. It's about 100 workers. They were also impacted by this same attack on Voice of America and the closure of the U.S. Agency for Global Media, because Radio Free Asia and other newsrooms are grant funded through the USAGM. So the effects that's happening to Voice of America is similarly happening to Radio Free Asia. All of the staff, 75% of the staff was put on unpaid furloughs starting on March 21st, and they are still on those unpaid furloughs. And these are journalists and media workers who broadcast into many different repressive regimes, like into Tibet and China, into North Korea, into Vietnam, into Laos, into many different countries across Asia. So we're happy to stand with our members at Radio Free Asia and going to continue this fight. Also really proud to be alongside the great journalists at Voice of America, Radio Free Europe, and all the other newsrooms that are critical to actually showing the world what a free press should look like. We are the beacon of that hope, and really proud to continue to fight with every single journalist and media worker in this room.
Thank you, John. I'm going to call on our AFGE representatives as a plaintiff. Paula Pickey, would you like to say something? Oh, okay. Is there a representative from AFGE who would like to say something? Okay. So, Kristin, thank you for coming.
Hi, I'm Kristin Bateman, and I'm proud to work with Democracy Forward and with this amazing team of lawyers and plaintiffs fighting this. Democracy Forward is dedicated to defending people who rely on our government and the services it provides, and that includes working to fight the Trump administration's efforts to dismantle the U.S. Agency for Global Media and to silence Voice of America and its grantee networks. This past Sunday, Voice of America, in its fight to continue existing, was featured on 60 Minutes. At one point, it showed a social media post by Steve Herman, quoting our president and CEO, Skye Perryman, arguing that dismantling of USAID makes us less safe at home. This is a post, like several of you might publish, about a news source giving an on-the-record quote, and that's the kind of job you do, and this is our job to defend you. We are proud to be here today amongst our co-counsel and brave plaintiffs representing journalists, global press freedom advocates, and multiple labor unions to celebrate Friday's temporary restraining order and to commit to keeping the pressure on this administration to stop implementation of the Trump executive order. The Trump administration is moving through our civil service like a horror movie villain. It's slashing workforces and carelessly destroying the government's ability to provide critical services. But let me be clear, USAGM has been targeted because of the freedom and accountability that they and their networks provide. Everyone standing here believes that the free press is the cornerstone of our democracy, and the abrupt and unlawful shutdown of USAGM is yet another step in an extreme authoritarian playbook that benefits no Americans, and it doesn't make anyone's life here safer, better, or easier. This case is about a critical constitutional principle. The president cannot unilaterally shut down an agency that Congress created. The separation of powers and the rule of law are at stake here. Silencing those who report the truth, especially those who have spent their careers countering disinformation worldwide, makes Americans less safe at home and abroad, and it further compromises the United States leadership in the world. Democracy Forward is committed to protecting the American people and defending the integrity of a free and independent press, and we're very proud to work with our partners to hold this administration accountable. Thank you.
Thank you, Kristin. Clayton Weimers with Reporters Without Borders, would you like to say a few words?
I'll just stand right here. My name is Clayton Weimers. I am the director of RSF USA, which is the U.S. office of Reporters Without Borders. We are the world's largest NGO that's devoted to the freedom of information for every citizen in the world. So I am here as the director of the U.S. office, but I'm also here on behalf of all of my colleagues around the world who work in our offices in 13 countries, as well as our network of correspondents who span 156 other countries, because we truly are everywhere, and no organization is better positioned than RSF to really understand the value of Voice of America and the importance that it plays to promote press freedom around the world. And one of the reasons that we are part of this lawsuit is because our staff and our network are irreparably harmed by the loss of VOA around the world. There are so many places in the world right now where VOA is among the most reliable, if not the most reliable source of authoritative information about the countries that we're working in. And so it puts our people in harm's way when you rob them of another source of vital information, whether it's about the latest government crackdown or police action against journalists or ethnic violence in a country that's rocked by civil conflict. Journalists, including the ones that work with RSF around the world, rely on each other to understand the situation on the ground, to stay safe. And so, when the opportunity arose to fight back against the Trump administration's illegal dismantling of VOA, we left at the opportunity to join our co-partners.
Thank you. This is a remarkable assemblage of plaintiffs, and it's a remarkable assemblage of lawyers working on this case. And this assemblage was put together in a matter of days. And this assemblage has succeeded in stopping the machine from moving forward. And this assemblage is now going to proceed to reverse the machine, to reopen the networks, to get the folks, the employees, the contractors back on the job where they belong. We're going to take questions now, and let's start.
Thank you. Just briefly before we start with questions, I wanted to recognize the 10 journalists who are in prison today in places like Russia, Vietnam, Belarus, who work for VOA, Radio Free Asia, Radio Free Europe. They no longer have a newsroom behind them in the same way they did. They were jailed for the work that they did for these agencies, and we ask that they be released immediately and without condition. And we call on our government to do what they can to facilitate the safety of these journalists. I'll mention just one case, a Russian journalist from Radio Free Europe. She was taken Christmas Day, 2024. She's in jail in Siberia, and working with our pro bono counsel at Covington Burling, we're filing an arbitrary detention case with the Working Group for Arbitrary Detention at the UN. These are the kind of actions that we need to take in order to support these people who are in harm's way. And I would just mention the dimension of this problem became clear to us when we invited 200 journalists from these agencies to come over to a jobs fair here at the Press Club, and to stand in the ballroom and sort of see that many people waiting online to try to find their next job. It was exhilarating, but it was also painful. They're professionals, they're special, and now they're searching for work. And so we at the center were pleased to pay for their entry. I call on all of you to do the things you can do to help people now that they're in this kind of situation. We all have our own ways to help. Okay, we'll take questions now, either for the attorneys or for the plaintiffs. If you can direct it to the person, that'd be great. Just go ahead, hands. In the back there, gentlemen.
Hi, thank you for doing this. I guess my question would be for David. I'm a reporter for Politico, and I've been talking with back in February, I was talking with folks here on Joe and Lisa's, and it's to me if you've touched on this already, but I guess what is the status of the TRO? What's the status of those on Joe and Lisa's here?
The TRO orders everything to stop, to freeze. And specifically with the J1 status reporters, and by way of background, these are the foreign reporters who are on an exchange program with USAGM and need to be in the program in order to maintain their J1 status in the United States. Now, many of them were told on March 16th that their contracts, these are contractors, were terminated effective March 31. What the order did was freeze that in place. The orders came before March 31, and those folks remain on payroll, remain part of the exchange program, and maintain their J1 status. Now, the day after the order was issued, the agency sent to the 500 contractors affected by it notice that their contracts are not terminated on March 31, that the contracts remain in place, that they remain on the payroll. And so with respect to the J1 folks in that category, life is essentially the same until the court acts further. Yeah, let me just add there is another cohort of J1 folks. One of the things the machine did, because it was easy, was to terminate probationary employees who were not afforded the same civil service protections. Some of those employees are J1 folks. We have spent days working with those folks, finding lawyers to protect their rights. And I think the immigration lawyers we're using, in particular Jan Paterson, have done an outstanding job to keep those folks in the United States under different visa statuses.
Thank you. Next question. Yes, sir.
I'm Pavel Novak. I'm from Czech Radio, Public Radio in the Czech Republic. I want to clarify the situation. So now you have some provisional decision of some further court. And what will be the next step? Are you asking the same court or another court to reverse it? It means to cancel that decision about dismantling Voice of America, and again to hire those people back or take them back and renew the broadcasting?
Sure. Excellent question. We are going back to the same court because in the United States, one federal judge has jurisdiction. And so his name is Paul Otken, O-E-T-K-E-N. He's a United States District Judge in the Southern District of New York. He has authority on the case, and we'll be going back to him shortly.
Can I just add something?
Please do.
So
Want to do it on the mic, Patsy?
I thought it was loud enough.
Well, it's for the camera.
So one of the things that we want is not just the reinstatement of all our colleagues, but also the protection of the VOA Charter, which guarantees our editorial independence. So for some of you who are not familiar with this is a 1976 law that was signed by President Gerald Ford that essentially says that Voice of America must broadcast factual, balanced, and comprehensive news. It must represent the entire American society, not just a segment of American society, which is why we believe that our broadcast should not just reflect the administration's point of view, the Democrats' point of view, or the Republicans' point of view, but represents all American significant thoughts. So our concern is if they bring us back next week, for example, all of us back, but they don't guarantee that we can still operate under the protection of the VOA Charter, can you imagine what kind of newsroom would that be? What kind of reporting would we be able to do to continue, doing it without fear or favor, the same way that we have been doing it? So this is a really key question for many of my colleagues and journalists who really is fiercely protective of this independence of journalism that we are known for. Many of my colleagues, including myself, come from places around the world where freedom of the press does not exist. That is why we think it is such a great treasure, and we are fiercely protective of it. So even if they return Voice of America, what we want is also the freedom to continue broadcasting under the law guaranteed by the VOA Charter.
Thank you. Thanks, Patsy. Other questions? Yes, sir.
This is Ben Jija from the service at VOA. I was wondering, is there any clear idea what the statutory means for VOA? Because both sides, USAGM, that's where they're hitting us. And they're going to trim it down to the statutory elements. What does that mean? And without having the support from Congress, so far we're making it. So what is the next step?
Well, so the executive order says that the agency is going to be trimmed down to its statutory minimum. Now, in my opinion, they don't know what that means. And in my opinion, they are trying to figure out what that means. And they haven't today, or perhaps tomorrow. Now, we know that's the case because at the hearing on Friday before the federal judge, he pointed out that the president's plan seems to be to issue executive orders without running them past anyone in the government. The idea is to issue an order, and in the judge's words, let the judges and lawyers figure it out. And that's where we are. I can tell you that the public statements by Kari Lake say, we're going to boil this agency down to the bone, that this agency is nothing less than a dead fish, and it's not savable. We obviously think that's nonsense. And we're here to protect the workers, the employees, the contractors, the audience. Patsy.
I always have something to add.
Please add.
I just want to touch on the issue of congressional support, which I think is really important. One of the things that we feel that, agencies like VOA, agencies like USAID, agencies like United States Institute of Peace, we are low-hanging fruit for DOGE. And the reason for that is because even though we do so much good around the world, we do not have a domestic constituency. I mean, nobody knows about VOA before they saw me on 60 Minutes, for example. That's just the nature of the way we were set up. We were set up to inform the world, not to inform the rest of the country. So congressional support is really important, and this is why we are doing this, to educate inform Americans about the value of VOA, the fact that even though we are spending $260 million a year, that gets us 360 million eyeballs and pairs of ears, around the world in various countries, including in countries where the decision makers are being faced with the onslaught of disinformation from our adversaries. And not to forget also the rest of our sister networks, combined it is 420 million viewers abroad. So congressional support is really important, and that's why we're making so much noise. That's weekly, weekly multi-platform unduplicated. Thank you, Aisha. That's one of our division directors there from the South Asia Service.
Thanks, Patsy. Yes, ma'am. Sorry.
First of all, I would like to thank all the plaintiffs and the lawyers who are really working very hard for us. I'm Sonam Sidhi from Radio Free Asia Veteran Service. We were actually told that we will be furloughed, unpaid furloughed, since 1st of March. So that's tragic. It's a nightmare for me. Actually, I'm a refugee for the third time. First in 1959, when Chinese occupied our country, Tibet, when I was just a small girl, and we fled to India. Then we were sent to Jammu and Kashmir, which is near to the border with China. And then in 1962, Chinese again, tried to occupy those border countries, places in India. So we fled again to the inner plains of India. And then when Congress graciously and, compassionately gave us 1,000 special visas for Tibetan refugees living in all, Indian subcontinent, I was one of the lucky ones to get visa. And then right now I feel as if I'm again a refugee. I have been, for the last almost 27 years, I have been working very hard for my people who are deprived of free press and voiceless people back in Tibet. The situation is getting worse every day. Our young children are sent to Chinese colonial schools. And, monasteries and all the Tibetan schools are shut off. Tibetans have no right to preserve our own culture and religion, and especially language and everything. It's all, they're trying to turn it into Chinese. What you call it as Sinization or something like that. So we need to have this Radio Free Asia, all the other language services who are reporting to the repressive regimes. And Xi Jinping is getting stronger and stronger. He just made himself, the king of People's Republic of China. So this is not the right time to stop, all this government-funded outlets to be shut off. We welcome all restructuring or whatever you want to do, make it better. We welcome that. But shutting off altogether is not a good idea. And we respectfully ask President Trump, Kari Lake, and all others who are in the authority to reconsider this one. And please reopen all the language services as soon as possible. Sooner the better. The longer it goes, who celebrated first time? The Chinese government, the Communist Party. And next one is Russia, who just occupied sort of aggressively doing lots of bad things in Ukraine. How can we just sit idle and do something like that? Please, please, I ask all the American people, compassionate people, and the government. This is not just for getting something back or giving back. It's the American value that we also very cherish and respect. We RFA Radio, Tibetan Service, and all the language services and VOA are the only outlets which broadcast uncensored, unbiased news to our people. And His Holiness the Dalai Lama, the beloved leader, icon of peace in the world, is going to celebrate his 90th year of 30th celebration very soon. And then he may be, announcing his reincarnation about that. All the world, especially Chinese Communist Party, they are looking at this thing. They are trying to appoint, as they have done for the 11th Panchen Lama's reincarnation. They want to select one from their own country. But His Holiness repeatedly said he wants to be born in a free country.
Ma'am.
So he may do a very important thing. So we need Radio Free Asia, VOA, and all the other language services to be here. Please, please, I plead everybody.
Thank you so much, ma'am. As you might ask your sources from time to time, do you have a question? No? Okay. Gentleman there with the hat.
First of all, thank you very much for your great efforts to support the VOA and USAGM. So you know that the NPR or AP have recently covered different news that challenges have been made against the decision, against the probationary employees or terminated probationary employees in different agencies or departments. Regarding VOA, RFA, or the staff, those staff in USAGM, have you planned any action, any legal action, or any support to protect, to defend, and to save and support those employees? May I repeat this, the probationary employees or the terminated ones. As far as I know, many of them are talented. They are young. They are talented. They're full of effort, and they want to contribute to VOA, to RFA, to USAGM, etc., to serve the audience and public everywhere in the world. And also many of them, among them, I have heard also that some of them have, more than 25 years or more or less 20 years of experience everywhere in journalism. They was not born yesterday. Have you got any plan to protect, to save them? Thank you.
So the question is about probationary employee status? Okay.
The answer is yes. We want to protect them. As you know, we filed a lawsuit, and we want the probationary employees to be part of that lawsuit. And we are talking to lawyers and law firms and organizations to help to make sure the probationary employees are part of this case. Because what is happening to the probationary employees is no different than what's happening to full-time employees, contractors. They're all victims as far as we're concerned, and we're going to help them.
Okay, just to follow up on professional employees. Is there a new lawsuit or part of the same? Because I have one of those in my service and she's totally fitting with the law.
Right. So the order that the judge issued on Friday was limited to anyone who was affected after the president issued his executive order on March 14th. Now, the probationary employees were let go in February and March. And our lawsuit was written in a way to cover the whole group. The judge, for understandable reasons, narrowed the case a little bit. But there are other lawyers, there are other lawsuits pending. As you know, Mike Abramowitz has filed a case where we plan to have those people represented and vindicated. So that's the goal.
I have a linked question, David. We have overseas contractors. They're non-U.S. citizens, but they're equally important to our job. These are our journalists who are on the front lines, often put their lives and their security at risk to get us the news that we report to the world. Their contracts were terminated after March 14th, but since they're not citizens and they're contractors, they're more vulnerable, they're overseas. I'm wondering if this lawsuit or any subsequent lawsuit in any way will protect that. I mean, even if the judge says their contract is considered not terminated, we won't be able to pay them anything because we need to pay them for the work they did, and with all of us on admin leave, we cannot assign any work to them. But at least if we come back, we can start assigning.
Well, as far as we're concerned, the judge has ordered a freeze, and a freeze is a freeze, period. We don't differentiate between classes of folks, where they're located. They're all on this part of the same mission to bring light to dark places. That's the bottom line. Now, I want to mention something about what I call the vacuum that's been created. As you know, 425 million people were listening to these networks, and now none are. A big concern, as we've said, is that vacuum is going to be filled by other countries' networks, and they are not going to share our views of democracy and objectivity in reporting. Now, this is not a theoretical matter because as we speak, those countries are taking up and using Voice of America bandwidths to broadcast in their message for themselves because there is no Voice of America broadcasting on those networks. And so I want to call on Steve Herman a little bit to elaborate on that.
Thank you, David. As some of you know, I'm a ham radio guy. And that's actually my Twitter handle is my ham radio call sign, W7VOA. And we're closely allied with shortwave listeners around the world who are reporting that already Chinese programming is popping up on some of the VOA shortwave frequencies. There is also a case, I believe, with Radio Marti using 1180 AM out of the Florida Keys. And I think the reason, David, that they went back on the air is because the FCC was going to take away that frequency and give it to probably a commercial broadcaster if Radio Marti stayed silent for long. Also, as Patsy's talked about, we have these hundreds and hundreds of TV and radio affiliates. We also have full-time FM frequencies across Africa, major capitals, Nairobi, and I'm not sure what, Kate probably knows the other ones. But those are also licensed in cooperation with those governments, and it's theoretically possible that the Chinese and the Russians could come in and take those over, but there's empty airtime, as you saw in the video now, for all these VOA affiliates around the world. And we do know that the CGTN in China and RT in Russia, there's Press TV in Iran, all broadcasting in English and other languages. And they're going to take advantage of this opportunity if we don't get back on the air very, very quickly.
There's 3,500 affiliates, VOA affiliates around the world, television, radio, digital. And it's very often that I and my other journalist colleagues, when we're doing a live hit with one of those affiliates, the person or the reporter or the correspondent before us or after us could be from RT, could be from CGTN. So just imagine those 3,500 affiliates now not being able to reach us and us not being able to push back against all the rest of the adversarial propaganda and disinformation that's being spread. I think that's the key question that Americans have to answer, is that are we willing to cede our platform to push America's story to the world if Voice of America is not there?
You know, we're right at 11, so these are going to have to be the last two questions. Yeah.
So we have reports inside RFA, USAGM that they start to lay off people after TRO ruling was issued. The termination notices started to go off on 28th, some went on 31st. This is after the TRO ruling. Even though RFA is not directly listed as a defendant on the case, isn't that an argument that USAGM should and must disperse some funds to maintain status quo, because RFA is a USAGM grantee and it says on the TRO as well? Thank you.
Do you mind? Okay.
Yeah, very quickly. You're right. They should be dispersing money, and in fact, the agency has told the judges in those other cases they will be dispersing money, and because they're dispersing money, the case doesn't need to exist. It's moot. The problem is they haven't dispersed the money, and that has been pointed out to the judges that they have not lived up to their word. And those cases continue until the money is dispersed, the people are paid, and the furloughs are rescinded.
Thanks. Soon you have the last word.
So there's a lot of information that's floating around, particularly in Twitter. Many of them, dissenting voices against VOA, RFA, and so on and so forth, have said that, well, apparently there's accusations against VOA right now that are helping to, quote unquote, validate the minds of people, like waste and so on and so forth. Now, what are some of the accusations that you have heard from the government that these are the reasons why all of this have happened and it should continue to happen? It's because as somebody from the outside looking at this, there's so much misinformation that's spreading out there, particularly within Twitter. It's it would be very, very helpful to hear from all of you as to what those, to get a clarification on those particular accusations.
So I'm going to call on Andy Celli to tell you what the government has been saying, specifically in under oath to the judge, and to give you a sense of what is going on in the Twitterverse or Xverse on these issues.
Yeah, I'll be very quick. They have not taken the position that waste, fraud, and abuse has been demonstrated to a degree that it warrants the activities that they've undertaken. They are not trying to justify this on that basis, not in court anyways. In the public realm, they're making that as a general statement, but they have not offered any evidence of it. The only thing they've said publicly, really with any specificity, they've said two things. One, they complained about the cost of the lease for the office, some office space in Washington, D.C., said that it was overpriced. And they thought it was a waste of money to have news services, to have VOA purchasing news services so they could see what other journalists were doing. These are people that do not understand how a newsroom works and that it has to have a physical presence in D.C. in order to operate. So you may be reading that on X, you may be reading that on the internet, but it really is a slogan. It's not evidence. And we brought that up in front of the judge, and the government lawyers sat there and said not a word. So they are not trying to justify this shutdown based on waste, fraud, and abuse. It doesn't exist.
And if I just may add, I've worked in VOA for 22 years, so I'm very familiar with our problems, and I will be the first one to raise my hand and say, here are my ideas on how to address them. But that's not what's happening. They're shutting us down
saying that we are terror sympathizers, we are spies, we are rotten to the core, we are left-wing propaganda. I mean, just look at voanews.com, news from 2 weeks ago, since when we were stopped, and just see if you can find proof of any of that.
And to add as well, we've always been very transparent, and this is what sets us apart from the Russian and Chinese propaganda. If there's a problem at VOA, we report on it. We report on everything. We owe our readers, our audience, that transparency that's included in our charter, and it's like embodied, I think, in all of us. We will report, we will be as transparent with our audience as possible. But like Patsy said, look at our context. We are following the charter, we're just providing independent, accurate, objective news.
May I add just to this point, just because of my position as a division director? We only spend $270 million, and I say only because we have 49 language services, and we are broadcasting around the globe. A single decent radio station in the US costs tens of millions of dollars per year. The entirety of VOA, our thousands of employees around the world, our 365 weekly audience, only 270 million. Just divided over 49, you'll get the average. How much can you waste out of that? Trust me, I'm part of the management. We were like, our ledgers were like pocket change. We were dusting like the cushions to find out where we could find change to give stuff to our reporters. We were not buying equipment. We were limiting travel. We were just focusing on just getting the best news out there for as cheap as we could.
Yeah, this job can only be done by government. You know, the idea that a commercial or a market solution exists where you can go in 40, 50, 60 languages, the countries that are supposed to receive it are going to try to block you. No business would touch this. This is something that has to be done the way you're doing it. Anyway, fascinating discussion. Thank you to our panel for being here. Thank you all for coming out and asking good questions. And we're adjourned.